Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. Today we're checking out the Daredevil by Brian Michael Bendis Omnibus, but before we get into that, I did want to briefly mention that my friend Jackson and I just released a new podcast called the Beggars Canyon Boys, and if you're a Star Wars fan, you can probably tell it's a Star Wars podcast. Here's the thing though, before this, I have never seen any of these Star Wars movies, haven't consumed any Star Wars media, so this podcast is basically my friend Jackson taking me through Star Wars in chronological release order, and we're not just talking movies though. We do movies, we do the comic adaptation, we do the comics that come after that, we also do the holiday special, we do the made-for-TV Ewok movies eventually, we're going to get into the role-playing stuff, we're just going down the line, taking all the Star Wars in that we can. He's the Jedi, I'm the Padawan. First episode is out now. Please go ahead and give it a listen. Second episode is coming out this Monday. But without further ado, let's check out this Daredevil book.
Here is the cover of the book, this awesome stoic image of Daredevil standing on a gargoyle in New York with his batons out, just super awesome. And here is the spine of the book. I always like how the Daredevil books look next to each other on the shelves. Really good spines. And here is the back of the book, showcasing a omnibus classic of all the issues contained in here. Okay guys, so let's get started with what this omnibus collects, and that is the Daredevil series that started in 1998, issue 16 through 19, issue 26 through 50, and issue 56 through 60. If you are wondering why there are some gaps there, well, it's quite simply because those issues weren't written by Brian Michael Bendis. I think the story still reads perfectly fluid, coherently, and fine without it, although I think it would have been nice for them to include those issues. But can I let you guys in on a little not-so-secret comic book secret, and truly not a secret at all, I guess, but you're almost never going to go wrong with picking up and reading a Daredevil story. Now, as I've stated, this one is written by Brian Michael Bendis, who I know does sometimes inspire strong opinions, but I will just say, I've always really loved his work and writing, and I've read a lot of great stuff from him, much more great stuff than otherwise. And really, I wouldn't be here if not for his Ultimate Spider-Man, but even with all that, I will say, hey, maybe I'm Bendis biased, but I don't think it's at all controversial to say that this is one of the Daredevil stories that deserves its spot in the ever-growing Daredevil Hall of Fame. And even if you're saying, Ryan, you're crazy for saying that, I think also it's not controversial to say that this book has some phenomenal artwork. So even if you're someone who disagrees with the writing style of this book, which again, I think that is more rare than not, we should remember that comics, I say this all the time here, are an interdisciplinary art form, so it's not just the writer, it's the artist, Alex Maleev, who's working most of this book, who, like I said, that artwork really, I think, does such a compliment to Bendis' writing, and even, like the colorist, for example, Matt Hollingsworth, that sets a tone for the series as well. It uses this dark and moody palette that really complements the artwork and the writing. And of course, that David Mack artwork in the beginning, which we'll talk about here more in a second, that incorporates watercolor and mixed media and all those collage elements, is just super dreamlike and ethereal and really works and is so cool. Alright, moving on though, I will say this is an omnibus that I think if you are new to the Daredevil character, you should be able to pick it up and read. It should be pretty accessible to you. The Kevin Smith run, if I'm correct, is the one that precedes this, which there is some important things that flesh out the character a little bit more that happens in there, but nothing is not explained in here. Like, you won't be confused about what is going on with the characterizations or anything like that. But it's definitely worth reading the run before this if you do want to just color it a little bit better. When it comes to the story of this book, the first thing that I'd like to call out, because I think it's super interesting, and to the credit of Bendis, pretty bold to do as well, because he takes the reins with this beloved character Daredevil, and the very first story in here actually doesn't focus on Daredevil that much. At least not explicitly, because the basic premise of the opening story is Ben Urich, woo, let's go, love him, is investigating, sorry, I just like him, is investigating a case that involves the son of Daredevil villain, who's a little goofy, Leapfrog. And the son has been sort of traumatized after perhaps witnessing a very violent event that happened between Daredevil and his father. And there's a very cool art utilization of the style of this story where they want to sort of explore the psychology of this child through the child's own drawings, and that will become like very fluid with the own artwork of the story itself. So it's all sort of interchangeable and just a really, really interesting read, and a visually interesting read as well. And that is the one that I was mentioning that David Mack worked on, and this is considered one of the most distinctive and powerful storylines in this Daredevil run, I believe, and that's in large part due to Mack's artwork as well. I don't want to draw too close a comparison between these two, but kind of a little Bill Sienkiewicz in the way that it's using innovative visual techniques to explore things a little deeper and more personally. But I think the story also is such a green flag in the start of this omnibus, because when you read it, I think what it told me at least initially was, oh, okay, Bendis is actually interested in exploring things like trauma, like the loss of innocence, moral complexities, and a lot of that minutia of being a hero and the people that get left in the wake, And I think he does a fairly successful job of consistently accomplishing that throughout this run. And for those of you who also are like, hey, I like that, that's fine, but is there still my crime noir, Daredevil, and Hell's Kitchen superhero type stuff in here? Oh yes, the New York underworld is very present here. Old and new players alike, Daredevil trying to take them down per usual. And I know what we all love in these Daredevil stories. I know what we like to see. We love the guy. We love Matt Murdock, but we also do take some joy in watching his world unravel as sort of the chaos of his superhero life and his legal life butt heads against each other. And I don't want to explicitly spoil anything that happens in this story, but that is a big part of it, sort of the convergence of those two lives. And how he has to deal with that challenge and the fallout that sort of comes from this. I know I'm being vague, but I'm also intentionally being vague because I want you to read this. I want you to read the next volume, which I think I actually liked a little bit better, but take that with a grain of salt because it's been a while since I read the second half of this story. But even the Daredevil runs that follow this one still build on some of that identity stuff and challenges that Daredevil is facing. And if you continue reading, you get some pretty nice payoffs for that. That is until Shadowland, really, but we don't need to talk about that. But yeah, this is a really gripping run. I think if you start reading it, it will be the type of story that you really don't want to put down. And if you're someone who really enjoyed the Netflix Daredevil series, I think a lot of inspiration was taken from this run and also Brubaker's run. I also like reading Daredevil stories because I feel like they are one of the only comics that will still really take full advantage of their supporting cast of characters, and specifically non-superhero powered supporting characters. To me, that always really helps flesh out a world and make it feel more real, and it helps flesh out our main character, I think, and makes them feel more real and personable, and helps with that sort of fine line of I have to keep all my personal identity stuff in check, and I also have to keep all my superhero antics in check too. A lot of really cool characters show up in this book as well, characters that you may not see in too many other places. For example, the Owl shows up in here. Of course, we've got some Daredevil classics as well, like Elektra. And let's not forget, I think it's no big spoiler, Wilson Fisk is in this, of course, the Kingpin. We are doing New York underworld crime, gritty crime noir stuff, right? I said crime twice. That's because this book's got double the crime. And as everyone knows, if you got double the crime, you've got to do double the time. And yet, this book takes no time at all to read. It feels like such a breeze because, like I said, once you pick it up, it's one of those stories where you're just like, well, okay, I can read a little bit more. And then you're like, well, now I have to read a little bit more. And then before you know it, it's 3 a.m. and you've finished Daredevil. But I'm really curious what you all think of this book if you have read it. If you haven't, let me know if you're planning on picking it up. And I'd also be curious to hear what everyone's favorite Daredevil run is, because there's so many good options to pick, and it seems like there's going to just be more and more good options in the future too. But with that, thank you guys so much for checking out this video. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you already are subscribed, I am super appreciative of you, and I'm going to be making a lot more videos here soon. And we're close to 2,000 guys, so I hope we'll reach that very soon. But with that, have a great rest of your day.